on this Father's Day, I want to jump right into what I want to talk about today. I feel like this is just a very special message for all of us, but I especially want to speak to dads and men and young guys in the room. I hope you'll listen to me too. The younger you can understand and get some of what I want to share with you today, the better. All right, and as I go along, some of you older guys in the room will go, yep, it'd be great if you get this when you're younger. Listen, there's an ancient Jewish tradition, all right? So you find this in the Old Testament a lot with Israel, all right? So the Jewish people, they are the same, the special called people of God in the Old Testament to show us Jesus ultimately in the New Testament. There were incredible rituals and customs that happened. Some of those have been carried on in Jewish culture today. In fact, I was talking with a friend after the first service. That's the benefit of the second service, by the way, as I can add some things. And he was telling me that he's from another country. The place that he's from, it's very kind of normal to do some of the things that I talked about in the message at 9 o'clock, and I was saying, well, it's not very normal in America. And so I've learned that in different cultures and stuff like that, we can be different. What is the tradition, the ritual that happened in the Old Testament and in Jewish culture? It's a father blessing his son or his sons. Today in Jewish culture, you'll often see the blessing pronounced not just on sons, but on daughters as well, which I think is great. But in the Old Testament, you often would see this thing where a father would pronounce a blessing over a son. So the custom is when a father blesses a son. What does that mean? Well, there were three things specifically that would happen when in ancient culture, a father would bless his son or sons. And here's what would happen. First, a physical touch. All right, so the father would, near the end of his life normally, place his hand on his son in a special ritual, ceremonial moment, all right, intimate moment, a meaningful physical touch. Now, you may not be used to that, having meaningful physical touch from somebody, especially a father. I'm not sure. Maybe you are. That's great. But this would happen in that culture. What else would happen? The father would say to the son words of affirmation and approval for who he is. So it was affirmation, approval of his son, all right? If you're a guy here, you're like, yeah, I like that. I like affirmation. I like approval. That's what most men are looking for. Hey, good job. Like when I mow the yard, I'm like, Shauna, did you see the yard? Look how good it looks. It's like we're always, anybody, seeking affirmation and approval. It doesn't matter what we do, right? She's like, it's the yard. But I'm like, but it looks so good. I'm just like, please tell me it's amazing. I mean, right? So that kind of affirmation and approval from a father was a big deal. And that's what happened in what was called the blessing. Very different than the birthright being passed on. This was the blessing being passed on from father to son, like a legacy. The third thing that would happen, physical touch, a meaningful touch, words, and not written, said. All right, said words, pronouncing to the son this affirmation and approval of who he is. And then thirdly, envisioning that son's future. Basically, this is your purpose in the world. Now go live it out. And it was always like, you wanted good, godly purpose passed on to you. This is good stuff, right? So it's like, man, how amazing in that culture to see that. And this was very typical, again, in the Old Testament and in Jewish culture. Without the father's blessing on a son, all right, listen to this, something would be missing in that child's life. And the child would feel it and sense it. They became like a wanderer, like wandering through life, trying to figure out who they were because their father did not tell them who they were. So it was very, very important. I would say to you, and I wrote this down and put it on the screen, a son hungered for the blessing of the father. Because without the blessing of the father, that physical, meaningful touch, those words of affirmation and approval to the son, the pronouncement or envisioning his future about what it could be, like saying that to the son, then he would just be kind of lost and feel like something was missing. And On this Father's Day 2022, I'm here to tell you I don't think much has changed with men. Meaning, we long for that. Men, if we're honest. I'm not saying women don't long for this. It's Father's Day. I want to speak to the men today. I feel like as guys, and I think this is true of young men as well, you don't have to be a dad. It's like it's wired into you to need what I just said. Meaningful touch from a father. Affirmation and approval from a father, right? And not just that, then a father who would tell you, here's a future that I could see you having. Go do that. Live into that future, right? I mean, this is what we want. This is what we need. And here's what's also true. If we don't get that in this world, what we end up doing is we try to fulfill that need for affirmation and approval in all kinds of ways. And that's what you see men doing all the time. We're trying to find affirmation. We're trying to somehow find approval. I read in a book once, and I couldn't remember who wrote it. A couple people came up to me again after the first service, and I think it was so-and-so, and I looked, and I still couldn't find it. But I said, did I get it right? And they said, yeah, it was kind of what you said. So this is a paraphrase of something I read in a book that I can't quite quote because I can't remember where it came from. Did that ever happen to you? But it hit me because it was so profound what it said. Listen to this, guys. It said, a man that doesn't, again, this is my wording, a man that doesn't receive his father's affirmation and approval when he is young will spend the rest of his life trying to find it. Like if you don't get, as a young man, affirmation and approval, especially from dad, you will spend your life trying to find affirmation and approval. Somehow, somewhere, you're going to get affirmation and approval. It can be in a job, it can be in a relationship, it can be in this, it can be in that. There's a number of places that we go trying to find it. There's a guy named John Eldredge. I don't know if you've heard of him, an author. I think a lot of his stuff is really amazing. It's not culturally right anymore. I find a lot of things today where we go, oh, you shouldn't say that, or that's not correct, or whatever. But I think it's true. What he speaks and what he says, there's a lot of good stuff in there. And he talks about the heart of men and how we're wired and how we're made. He talks in his books about this, guys. The father wound is what he calls it. That because no father gets it 100% right, no father does. No earthly dad gets it 100% right. Your dad did not get it perfect. Some of you are like, no, he didn't get it right at all. I understand there's some of that. Others of you go, my dad did a pretty good job, or he does a pretty good job with this stuff. He does affirm me. Or some of us, our dad's not around anymore. You know, I mean, there's just all these things, right? But in the book, he talks about the father wound and that every man has it. And basically, it's where our dad fell short and wounded us in some way as a son. And so what we do in this world is we try to cover up that wound and not let anybody see it, mask it, because we don't want people to see our vulnerability or that we're broken or that there's a place in us that is kind of an unmet need. And so we're trying to fill that need. We're trying to fill that need with all kinds of things. Does that make sense? I feel that. I don't like to talk about it. I don't want to say I have a father wound, but like all of us do, right? All men, he talks about, struggle with that because of this need for affirmation and approval, and very often we don't get it. John Eldredge says in his books, and I think this is really good, that men's ultimate question, if you say, what are men asking in this world as they walk this earth? Think about this. I think men are asking this question, as Eldredge says, do I have what it takes? That's like what guys wonder. Do I have what it takes? Am I good enough? Can I be the dad I want to be? Can I be the husband I want to be? Can I launch this business? Do I have what it takes? You know, that's why, do you know that most of the guys I talk to who really are struggling, it's often when they're between jobs. Think about that. Why? Because there's a portion of their life where their identity is lost because And what do guys say? They never go, tell me about you and like who you are. What do we say? My name's John. My name's, whoever. What do you do? That's what we ask. And so and we answer with what we are. We don't say what we do. I don't say I preach. I say I'm a preacher. My identity is preacher. My identity is pastor. I'm a whatever, plumber. My identity is plumbing, right? My identity it's always almost tied to our work. And so when a man doesn't have work, how interesting is it that we struggle? Why? Because we're like, I don't have any affirmation or approval from work anymore. And so I don't know who I am. I struggle with that. I'm a guy who struggles with that. Do I have what it takes? Very often is what we're asking. The blessing of a father, an earthly father, often helps to answer the question, do I have what it takes? Right? When a father is telling his son in meaningful ways, meaningful touch, hand around the neck, not this way, but, like, hey, son, right? Sometimes it's that too. My boys, like, it was down here, and now it's like, whoa, you're bigger than me, right? But I'm still your dad. Don't you? Have you ever said that if you got older kids? The meaningful touch, the affirmation and approval, if you receive at least some of that from a dad, helps, right? If you have a father who told you could do it, you can be anything you want to be, all that kind of stuff. Here's your future. You can walk in it. You can be a great husband, great dad, whatever. All these things that we long for when we ask the question, do I have what it takes? If you have a father who's been telling you some of that, then it certainly helps answer that. But again, your earthly dad didn't get it 100% right, did he? No earthly dad does. Some do okay, and some do really well, and some don't do well at all. Some of you might say, I don't feel blessed at all. I feel cursed. And that's honesty. Like, it's so broken, John, you have no idea. I mean, some of us have no father at all. There are people in the room who would say, I don't have a father, or I don't know who my dad is, or whatever. And again, in culture, we like to say, oh, it's fine, you're totally fine, that's not needed. You can read statistics and stories and stuff like this. It will tell you that when a father, especially a good father, is in the home, it makes a difference in that home, especially in the identity of those kids and things that they need. I'm not saying mom's not important. Of course she is. And some of you moms, I was saying to one between service, happy Father's Day, because like you're doing both roles. Some of you single moms, you're amazing in that case. And I understand that. But when there's a dad missing, or maybe you had an absentee father, that can be like worked all the time, wasn't really around, didn't pay you attention, tugging at, let's do, and didn't happen, that kind of stuff, right? That's normal. I think I said a too busy father. Or a father who pursued other things, work, money, take care of the family type of mentality, which is important, but to the detriment of the relationship with you, right? Can happen. Sometimes other women, sometimes divorce and things like that where difficult things happen, and they do. And there's, if you've been through that, there's love and forgiveness for that, obviously. I'm here to say that, but that's hard for a child to see, especially a son, because they connect with mom, right? And so they're struggling with that. So, or a father who has an addiction or a habit that's kind of hurting the whole family. I can't tell you how many times I talk with people and it's like, I had an alcoholic father. And they talk about that, and it's always negative. There's nobody who goes, and it was wonderful. I mean, it's just not what happens when somebody has an addiction that takes them away from the family or whatever. All right, some of us had an angry father or are the angry father. I identify with that one. I often talk about that and confess that to you because it's something that I continually have to work on. I can be the angry dad, and that comes out towards your kids. Or an emotionally or verbally abusive father. I mean, there's just a number of things, right? And you're like, man, happy Father's Day. What a great message. But I think you have to look at the father wound for a moment and go, yes, there's something missing. I do feel like a wanderer sometimes in this life, and I'm wandering around trying to find affirmation and approval, and I'm struggling, and you're calling it out, and I don't know if I like it or not, but it's real. It's real in my life. Many of you would say, I really haven't received the blessing thing that you talked about, even though you're hungry for it. Remember, I said that in the Old Testament, especially because it was such a ritual and a thing in culture, people were hungry. Young men were hungry for the blessing of the Father, so that culture would know that, hey, yeah, the son has been blessed in this case and can go out. I mean, we still want that. And so we, even though we struggle with it, we're hungry for it, for those things. Many of us have been, like I said, wounded by our own dads. And here's the thing that I want to say. You're going to find a way to affirm yourself as men. You're going to find a way to find approval. You're so hungry for it, it's wired into you that you're going to find somebody or something or in this world to tell you you have what it takes. So even if it's fake, even if it's not really helpful, you will find a way where somebody will say, you're great, you have what it takes, because we long for that. Here's the thing. Let me stop for just a moment, and I added something in my notes this morning and say this. If you didn't have the best dad, just a note here, just a pause. He too was looking for everything that we just talked about. Grace and forgiveness would be helpful for you to be able to move on into your future. And I know there are very difficult and bad things that happen. But I don't ever feel like unforgiveness helps people. What will help you is forgiveness for that, and at least the acknowledgement and understanding that whatever he was pursuing, however, what was going on, he too was just like you, looking for this affirmation and approval. And we're not going to stop looking for it. We're not, until we find it, no matter what. Now, there's a reason for this. So here comes the good news. You ready? Y'all want some good news on Father's Day? There's a reason for this. I actually believe it is wired into us to need affirmation and approval and a blessing. It's wired into us by God. And here's why this is good, that you need this and you long for it. And it's like most men, at least, I think every man here would have to say, yes, this is true. I don't want to uncover this, but I'm here to tell you there's some of the things John's saying, I totally get that, because it's wired into us. And how interesting that it's common, and I could pull men together from all over the place, and it's common that we need this. Here's what I want you to hear that I think is the good news. Without our hunger for affirmation and approval, we wouldn't finally find God. Some of us, it takes a while for that. Some of you might today find God because you're like, oh, I've been looking for it in this relationship. I thought if I just had this marriage, or if I just had this dream job, or if I just had enough money, and I find, well, if you hit that amount right now with the way the stock market is, you're amazing. Can I talk with you? But I mean, things, I don't even like to open that stuff up right now about retirement. I did it the other day. I'm like, somebody told me to trust God. I'm like, I love you. Thanks. You ever say that to somebody who says that? Thank you. But we wouldn't finally find God if it weren't true. You're hungry for affirmation and approval, guys. It's like it's there. And so ultimately, I hope that drives you to the point where you find God and where you come to this understanding of God does affirm his children, and you are his sons. I'll say more about that in a moment. God does approve, puts the stamp on approval of his children, his sons. Well, John, I have sin in my life. Me too. But he approves of you. He loves you. You don't have to earn him and trying to, all the stuff that we do. We struggle because we live in a world where our own fathers don't get it 100% perfect, no matter how great they are at it. They don't get it perfect. And so when I tell you that there's a God who gets it perfect, you're like, But see, that's what faith is. It's this understanding of, I've been searching for it here, but maybe I need to look for it here. It's when our eyes go from what I often say, horizontal, constantly trying to find it here, to God, would you help me? And he's like, yes, finally. I love you, and you're approved, and you're affirmed. Again, well, I didn't maybe say this yet. When you come to me, see, we have to connect with God. We have to give ourselves to Jesus Christ. We have to receive what God has done for us in Jesus Christ. And we accept that and receive that and own that and take that on our own selves. All of a sudden, we realize we have what we need. God is the Father who affirms his children. God is the Father who tells us we're approved. And if your earthly father fell short, God will not. If your earthly father was imperfect, God will not be imperfect. And I know that's hard to believe, but more and more I realize belief is faith. There is a leap of faith I have to take where I go, this is who God is, and I'm going to believe it. So let me share with you something about God as Father and actually his Son Jesus, all right? Because I know that was a long setup for where I ultimately want to land. And it wasn't just the introduction, okay? Let's talk about Jesus for a moment. Jesus was God's Son. So I'm talking to you as sons, right? As children of God, we're saying that today. But let's be careful and not confuse, and I don't think it's that difficult, but I just let you know you're not God, right? None of us as men are God. Jesus is God. He has a Father, and we have the Holy Spirit. We have the doctrine of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Jesus is fully God. Jesus has never been created. Jesus created. There is false teaching, and even in the church today, that talks about Jesus being created. He wasn't created. He's God. He's always existed. Boom, blow your mind, right? That's why we know we're not God, because I can't figure that out. So Jesus has always existed. He wasn't created. He's the creator. We as sons of God are his children. We are created when our parents came together, right? We were created. Procreation is called, where we come together into this world and we're created. We're born, a miracle, crazy, right? That's why I see a baby born, I'm like, how can somebody not believe in God? It's crazy, right? How amazing it is that a child comes into this world. And so we're created, and we're sons of God, daughters of God, but I'm talking to the guys today. Think of it as Jesus is the Son of God with a capital S, we're sons of God with small s. Does that make sense? He's the creator, we're the created. But think about him for just a moment. When Jesus was about to enter his full-time ministry, and I understand that because I went to seminary, and but I went to seminary, I did all this training. Jesus did all that, right? He was raised in a Jewish family. He was fully God and fully human. I used to say 50% each. I actually now say 100% each. He was fully God, fully human, completely. And so when he was here on this earth, he was about to go into his mission and ministry, launch into what it was really going to be. And when that happened, God blessed Jesus. God blesses Jesus. God affirms Jesus. And it's amazing. We find this in Luke chapter 3, verses 21 and 22. It says this, when all the people were baptized, it came to pass that Jesus also was baptized. And while he prayed, the heaven was opened. So weird. Why is Jesus getting baptized? Does he need to become a follower of Jesus? He is Jesus. He is God. What is happening in Jesus' baptism? Jesus' baptism is about God blessing his Son. Hang on to this story for a moment. It's amazing. So Jesus prays and heaven opens. I wish that happened when I pray, right? Just like that. But it says this, heaven opened. And then it says, and the Holy Spirit, watch this, descended in bodily form like a dove upon him. I find that interesting. I'm not sure I ever saw the words bodily form. So it's like a dove comes down, and I think of this, and I don't want to stretch it too far, but it does seem like a meaningful physical touch to me. That this dove comes down and rests, it says, upon Jesus. It came down upon him. Some translations say, and rested on him. And a voice came from heaven, an actual voice. It wasn't a Father's Day card or something like that, right? That's good. We do that. But he actually spoke. And look at what he says. You are my beloved Son. In you I am well pleased. He didn't speak about Jesus. He spoke to Jesus. He said it to his Son. And what does he say? You are my beloved Son. That means I love you. I'm proud of you and who you are. And in you, I am well pleased. Some translations say, I take great joy in you as my Son. I mean, there's no more meaningful words than that for a son to kind of hear something like that, because we crave that kind of stuff. For somebody to tell us that, especially for our own Father to tell us this. So what is happening here? Jesus is about to go into his ministry. He's about to launch into this 3-year thing where he's going to gather disciples. That's in Matthew's gospel. He goes out in the wilderness for 40 days right after this to be tested by the devil. So right after he receives approval from his Father, that moment of blessing, then he's able to face that spiritual enemy. I mean, I think that helped him as he went out there, because he knew he could do what God called him to do because his Father said those words to him. So this is the stamp of approval upon Jesus. You're like, did he need God's stamp of approval? I think he did. Says he was 100% human, just like 100% God. He knows everything that we need. It talks about this in the New Testament. He's been tested in every way, and so he understands these things. Because he was completely human, aren't you glad he understands the need for affirmation and approval? And where did he go for affirmation and approval? He went to his Father, and his Father said to him, you are my beloved Son, in you I am well pleased. I take great joy in you. You make me, I'm so proud of you, Son, for who you are and how you live your life, and I know you can do it. The Father was basically telling the Son, you have what it takes. Right? That's the question that men have. Do I have what it takes? And the Father is telling the Son here, Jesus, you have what it takes. I believe you will accomplish the mission that I've put you on this earth for. And you're like, well, he was fully God. He was fully human as well. Remember that. And he needed that relationship with the Father. And if he needed it, don't we need it? We need the relationship with the Father. It amazes me how we wonder sometimes how Jesus does what he does, but he had that relation. We often attribute it to he was God. But if you will read the Gospels, you will find that Jesus had an intimate relationship with his Father. Over and over, he escaped to go be with his Father. He leaves one scene where people are getting healed, and it's an incredible ministry moment. It'd be like right now, I don't know if this is an incredible ministry moment or not, but he just walked out on everybody. He said, let's go across the lake and get some rest. I need to spend time with my Father. He leaves people that have need to go be with his Father. You're like, why? Well, he didn't really need that, right? He was just says he needed it. He left those situations very often. Not because he didn't love people and all that, but he knew, got to get my cup refilled. Got to remember who I am. I'm not going to make it to the cross without my Father. And his Father's telling him, you have what it takes. You have what it takes, Jesus. You guys, you're sons of God too. If you've given yourself to Christ, if you've accepted Jesus into your life, you are. And he wants you to be sons of his, daughters of his. But as sons of God, we ask the question, do I have what it takes? Scripture teaches us that we are his sons. We are his children. I love in 1 John chapter 3, verse 1, John says, see what great love the Father has lavished on us. He loves us. He approves of us. He affirms us. That we should be called what? Children of God. This is talking about men and women here, sons and daughters. All right? And that is what we are. I find that interesting. That he says you're sons of God, but because they know us in Scripture, they know how we are, right? When these things are written, it's like the person has to say, and that is what you are, because I know you struggle to believe that you're a child of God. You are a son of God. That is what you are. That is who you are. Sons of God. He is your Father, and he blesses you. And I wanted to tell you that on Father's Day. He affirms you. He approves of you in all the ways that you need. Guys, you need it. As fathers, you need it. As husbands, you need it, right? As people in the workplace, because it's so easy for our work to become our God rather than let God be our God. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, we need it in those times that you might be between a career or something like this. You need it. Recently, you may know that our church has exited our denomination. July 1st will be the official day that we're completely independent from the United Methodist Church. And as we've been doing that, there is still within me, I will tell you, a sadness. And you might go, I thought you wanted to do this. I did. But I am leaving what I've known for 27 years. And so for me, that has still been a brokenness and a difficulty. Why? Because my identity has been that. My identity has been, I'm still a pastor, but I'm not the pastor in the denomination I was in. I'm like, am I still somebody? Does it still count? Do I have what it takes to lead a church that's not connected to the denomination? Did I lean on that? All those things, does that make sense? You have them in your own life, guys. And here's what I've learned. When I have God the Father, I have what it takes. That's kind of the bottom line. If you have God as your Father, then you have what it takes because you have God as your Father. And He blesses you, He affirms you, He approves of you as you live out what that means in this world. Does this hit? Isn't that what we say today? Trying to use that young language, probably shouldn't. Does it impact you? Especially guys in the house today? Are you like, do you get it? You're going to spend your life looking for this. This is why I say it's so important for a young man to hear this and to get it today or to begin to understand this. You're going to spend your life looking for affirmation and approval. You're going to spend your life looking for the blessing of the Father. You have the blessing of the Father. I'm not saying fathers shouldn't bless their children. We should. We shouldn't do that with our sons and daughters. We should. Do the best we can. We should. But we won't be perfect. And we're all a result of that not being done perfectly in our own lives. So guys, today you can leave with a blessing. You can leave by faith knowing you're affirmed and approved by God. John, I'm a sinner. You don't know what I did this week. You don't know what I've done in my life. God says, I am well pleased with you. I take great joy in you. You're like, yeah, but I take great joy in you, son. See, it makes no sense to us, does it? But we begin to live into that when God says, this is your future. It's better than that. You're not going to be addicted to that. You're not going to continue in that way. You're not going to keep looking at pornography. You're not going to go after that woman when you're married. You're not going to chase money over me. You're not, all these things. I know what your future can be because I made you. I created you. And I believe in good things and good purposes for you, son. This is what God says to us. It's the blessing.